is a Malachite #1, hide glue water, Malachite #2, Malachite 3, Malachite 4, and then we get into our darker colors. And then a Malachite mica alabaster mix. So we're making different piles of 1, 2, 3, and 4. Little divots in the plaster, little plaster bowls in a way, which the glue will be then poured into. So just make little wells in the top of the plaster mounds. Obviously, #1 is going to be the main mix. The other ones are going to be accented mixes. Adding the glue water into the mounds of plaster. Glue is added to retard the set of the plaster, so you have more working time. You're using hide glue or rabbit skin, Dave? Hide glue. Hide glue is a glue mixture, or it comes in pearls. If you double boil it down so it's liquidy, not gelatinous but liquidy. What it does, a lot of woodworkers use it for a bonding agent in cabinetry or fusing wood together. We use the hide glue in order to retard the set of the plaster. If you use just plain water, the plaster would set way too fast. So you need to slow the set down in order to make it workable. This will allow David to work with it for a good about 45 minutes, whereas the plaster would typically set somewhere between 20 to 30 minutes at the most. And I'll let that soak in a little bit so it's not running all over the place. Keeping a clean area so there's no cross-contamination in colors. Get your colors to be pretty pure. Slow mixing of each color. As you mix, the pigments are going to become blended in with the plaster even more. So the pigment plaster is going to get darker with time. So you're just going to slowly add a little bit more moisture until you get the right consistency. You don't want it wet, too wet. You because then you're not going to get the definition of the striping that you want, but you don't want it to be too dry because you don't want it to be too crumbly for this kind of scagliola. Today David's making a malachite bowl, so this will be the first color. Now if it is too wet, you can always add more plaster in order to get the right consistency that he wants. So mix number 3. We'll tune back in after he's gotten all the colors mixed, and then we can show you next. Basically, you mix each of your piles in this fashion, making sure that you've got a moldable consistency or a formable consistency. So now David's gotten all of his mixtures mixed, but now he's looking for the right consistency. So some of it needs to be firmed up. So he's mixed it, the initial mixing, and now he's adding more plaster in order to get the consistency that he wants. And this is just so you can really manipulate the form. So as you can see, number 1, 2, 3 are still quite liquidy. 4 and 5 look pretty good, but it really does come down to just the feel of it. So really kind of relying on just your senses. Will the plaster hold up the way you want it to? That's number 3. Yeah. That's number 2. That's number 3. So just put 3 on 3, 3 on 2. Anyway. If you are aware that you just put 3 and 3. Alright.
It's funny if you mix them up a bit wrong, it's good.
This is pigment and malachite, so this has actually got kind of a pearlescent shine to it. This is going to be this pearlescent kind of really soft ochre veining that runs through the bowl. So we've got 2 shades. We've got a light and a medium.
And lumps of alabaster in this as well.
And lumps of alabaster. Let's see the lump of alabaster, Dave. So big chunks of alabaster, which is an old chessboard that we've used for quite a long time. We've been playing chess with this chessboard for quite a few years, and it's become quite useful in a lot of our scagliola. Although I like my old chessboard, I like to play a game of chess. So Dave's just going to continue mixing those, and we'll get back to you when we've got them just right. So he's going to mix them just like he did these other mixes, and when we can make more sense out of the table, I'll get back to you on that. So he's put everything in a V shape, so we're getting a variegation of color. And now he's making these pancakes, so to speak. He's cutting them into slices, and he's going to have a light, a bit darker, a bit darker, a bit darker, a bit darker out of this pile. Mixing it. And it's going to continue this mixing for the next 2 piles. So I have a light, medium, dark, and then an even darker. Create all these different pancake layers. consistency of it, so we add a little bit more plaster, make it a little bit drier. Dave, could you cut one all the way through in different, just like pre-cut them, just so I can show them. So that's 1, that's 2, that's 3, that's 4, and some neat pigment patties. All right, so it looks like a complete mess at this point, but you'll get the point on the next section after he's done mixing up. So we've got a lot of our variations here. Stop for a second so I could just show variation. So we've got all the different variations of color, from light to slightly darker to slightly darker to the darkest. So Dave's going to start arranging pancakes now, and he's going to start stacking them on top of each other. And all these processes might seem like completely like, what the hell is going on? But it really is just practice, practice, practice. And knowing and familiarizing yourself with, if you're trying to recreate malachite, really get to know malachite, really get to know the veining of it, really get to know the structure of it. So we've got all of our mixes on top of each other, and let's see, bring that up and show us. So don't move too much. So this is the veining. You can see the gradation of it. You can see the variations, the layers of it, the light and darks of it. And so when we reference back to our bowl again, this is kind of a cross-reference of it's set already, this area right here. So those are all those pancakes stacked on top of each other and layered on top of each other. And that's what you're trying to get, nice, even, soft, gentle layering. Now what he's doing is he's spiraling it, he's kind of rolling it, flattening it out without bleeding anything into each other. This is kind of just where the mad scientist comes into it. There's no rhyme or rhythm. You know, I'd love to say that there's a scientific method to his madness, but, you know, there isn't. So he's just trying to get it so each layer is shaping itself. Spiraling, 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 spiraling. Let's turn that over and let's see what it looks like on the other side too, before you put it all together. Let's see. There we go. So because Malachite's a very spirally design. So you're basically making pumpkin rolls. Nice streak in there. It's a good streak. So now we've got a bunch of pumpkin rolls, green pumpkin rolls all over the bench. If you're a bread maker, this is the art for you. If you're a pastry cook or a pastry chef, this is definitely good for you. I'm just gonna mix these little small, tight rolled bonbons in. And so I'm gonna pile it up in the same pile. Great big loaf out of it all. Stick it all back together like nature intended it to be. Rolled out. Layup begin. Use some sheer curtains in here so you don't get so much sunlight. Sunlight's really messing with it. This is the main veining, so to speak. So you'll see through here, back on the reference, this big swath right here. That's basically what he's laying up now. This one's got a whole lot more stuff going on, but this main thing is what he's laying down right now, this main veining. That's what that is. So all of this other stuff, like this detail, is what he's laying up right along the side of that vein. It's very hard to see with the sunlight right now. And it's really hard to tell on the back of it, but a cross cut will give you all of that little detail. So we'll get back to you after he's laid up more. Basically, you want to use that whole loaf for the whole coverage of this mold. So now, in order to create that golden ochre veining, wet that down, and then he's got the section of his malachite area that he's kind of just dusting with the sienna, really, and alabaster. You can hear the alabaster in the chunks a bit when it hits the table. Like marbles hitting the table. And he's mixing that into his mix, and that's going to create a golden veining somewhere in amongst this area. Not to muddy it up, but just to coat it in a way. So you don't want to really seriously wet mix because you don't want to muddy it up, but this is to coat it, get those alabaster chunks to kind of fuse in there. And when he cross cuts it, you'll see a nice golden veining going through it. It's kind of coated on the outside and mingled in between it. So it's going to cut a vein wherever he wants. It's up to you, however or wherever you want it. So kind of like split the sea of malachite. And now we're going to put this alabaster ochre veining in amongst it. So it's going to have a nice strong vein straight through the bowl. Fans out towards the edge. So now the whole bowl has been covered, tidying up the sides because the top part of the mold that we took off earlier is going to be squished down onto this, and it's going to allow it to be set. So just kind of getting the whole thing patted down to where you want it. Smacking the baby's bottom in a way. Oh, you put a square base on the bottom, squarish base on the bottom? Oh, okay, so it sits flat on a table. I getcha. A is here.
Hello, Dave's assistant here, Ben. I'm just gonna walk you through what Dave's doing here to the malachite bowl. Right now he's got a hacksaw blade attached to a piece of wood, and he's just kind of cutting down the bottom of the bowl here, sticking out of the top of the mold, making it nice and flat and even before he actually takes the bowl out of the mold, which he's doing now. He's just undoing these screws here that hold the mold together and taking the pins out. There goes that anchor, and now looks like this screw's a bit tight. So David is, I think he's going to use a screwdriver here. Yes, okay. The screw is coming out nice and clean. And off with the mold. The bowl's sticking to the mold a bit, so here it is. And he's just going to give it a whack on the table to remove the bowl from the mold. And it comes right out there. And you can see that it's very muddy currently before it's been honed down and filled. It's kind of this cloudy kind of patches of color. And there it is there. Very kind of holy and unfinished. Okay, and now, after being maybe quickly sanded down once and then filled, this is the bowl being stopped, having been stopped. Stopped just being another word for being filled with more pigmented plaster in the correct areas. And you could just get a look about here where he's filled over top of the vein with some more sienna, ochre, yellow, and the rest of the bowl with like a dark green. And here Dave is wetting and sanding the bowl with some wet and dry sandpaper. It's a very specific type, so that we get a nice kind of even curve here and it doesn't tear up too deep in. It is quite coarse to really get a good sanding in the early stages. You gotta keep it nice and wet so it's lubricated and it has an even pull on the plaster. And here you can see some of the cloudiness going away and some of the pattern coming out, keeping lots of water in the bowl to keep the sanding smooth. And you can see some black veins, some yellow veins there coming out. And each time it's sanded, he uses a finer and finer grit to really polish up the bowl. Right now it really is the first stages of the sanding. So now we see the bowl here after being sanded down once, but it still needs to be filled again. So he's just wetting it up so the plaster really fills up all the small holes and all the little spaces in the plaster. So it needs to be nice and wet. And here David is just mixing some pigment with some plaster, getting that nice ochre sienna yellow that he is now brushing into the veining. It doesn't have to be perfectly precise. It just has to really cover that whole veining area and really get into all the little notches and holes in the bowl, even up on the rim there. And you don't see it in this video, but he's also done this to the other side as well. And every time he fills it, he does both sides. And it really is just a process of filling and then sanding and then filling and sanding with higher and higher grits. And here he is using a plastic card, usually a credit card or something, some old ID card or something, to strike away the excess plaster and to get a nice and flat kind of surface there, so that so it makes the sanding faster and easier and more even. And now he's just kind of painting a green plaster over the rest of the bowl to continue filling all of these notches. And you can see he gets his brush wet there from the water down in the bottom of the bowl to keep it nice and malleable. And he goes up right to the side of the vein and continues filling on the other side there, and even in between the green bits on the vein. And so now we really have a thick layer of this fill, really covering the whole bowl. And we want to make sure that the rim is filled as well. This really gives you an idea of the scope of the project, and really how much vigilance and patience you have to have when taking on a project like this, and really how much attention to detail you have to keep. And now he's just finishing up there. Now we're just really making sure that the rim of the bowl has no notches in it and no breaks. We really want it to be nice and even. So he's just filled it with his scalpel, his small metal scalpel tool there. And now it's wet again, and you can really kind of see a little bit of the pattern stick through the filling. You can see a little bit of it as it is wetted before he starts sanding the rim, because he wants it nice and flat, a nice flat even rim there for the edge of the bowl. And here he's got his sandpaper wrapped around a block of wood to get a nice even pressure. And so at this point, David, as he shows you here, is about down to 600 grit, which is quite high. And you can see that the design of the bowl is really coming out. It's very detailed. That eventually he will get to a grit 2000 to really have a polished shine on the surface of the bowl. So he's almost at 2000 now. And then finally, you can see the bowl here basically finished being sanded. Eventually he'll put a layer of Kramer oil when it's completely finished, so that the bowl can soak up a layer of oil to really strengthen it and give it that real shine that comes with this nice Scagliola bowl. Beautiful.